Hey guys, it's Oggy back again with another video. I know I've been gone for a while, but it's time to pick up the ball and start this stuff again. And today I thought I'd talk about the seahorse. I thought I'd talk about Seahorse Care, what do I do to keep them, and just some general fun tips. First of all, this is a dwarf species of seahorse. He will not get too much bigger than what he is now. I think he'll reach a maximum of 10 centimeters. Oh, don't quote me what that is in inches. As you can see, I keep him in LPS and softy tank. Now generally it is a no-no to keep seahorses with corals because it's just kind of hard to do, because when seahorses feed, they vaporize their food, and when they vaporize their food, it's called a snick when they take the food in, and they take the food in, like really quickly suck it in, eat it, and then vaporize it. I'll show a clip right now. Anyway, they take the food, vaporize it, and crap goes everywhere. So they increase the phosphate to nitrates in the tank, and obviously corals don't like that. Also, corals can sting seahorses. Now, I've personally never had any problem with these softies, mushrooms, or the Gonipora ever sting any of my seahorses. They actually swim through it fine, and they like to grab onto them, and they do it all the time. Starting off with feeding, how do you feed a seahorse? Well, I generally start feeding, when I first get a baby seahorse, I will feed them I'll feed them fish eggs or lobster eggs. And then once I see they aggressively attack the cube, so I basically turn my filtration off, let the cube float in the water, and then let them get it. Some people use feeding stations. For example, they'll take a shot glass and stick it to the side of the tank, turn the pumps off, and at a certain time of the day, the seahorse will come and eat there. Like I said, I personally drop a cube in, just a small cube. So for example, you take a cube of mices and you cut it into quarters. 1/4 of a cube will do per seahorse per feeding. And you generally want to feed them at least twice a day. Probably 3 times would be better, because they don't exactly eat large quantities of food immediately. It takes them a very long time to eat it. It's better to separate their feedings, do smaller feedings to stop them from increasing the nitrate and phosphate in the tank from just leaving leftover food. As you can see, people have a misconception that they can't handle flow. This guy's right in the full flow of the filter. He's absolutely fine. They don't like extremely turbulent places, as long as they have places to hitch. For example, they love holding onto a heater, and as long as they have calm places, they will be more than happy to live in the tank. Now, it's basically the same parameters you would to keep a reef tank is what you need for seahorses. The only difference is seahorses are more susceptible to disease and internal parasites and infections. So I generally run this tank at 24 degrees Celsius, a bit lower than I'd keep my other reef tank, which is at 25. Other diseases seahorses suffer from include, for example, they get their own version of white spot, but instead of getting white spot, their skin starts to peel back. Once again, that would be a bacterial infection, and there are things you can do to treat it, but again, you'd have to probably do your research before you get into that. I've luckily never had to deal with that. Also, the one thing I have dealt with, seahorses actually have like a type of pouch where they keep their babies, and sometimes they can get air stuck in there and they cannot swim. So what you do is you basically take the seahorse, let it graft your pinky, hold them to the surface, squeeze their belly, and take, for example, a toothpick and put it in the front slit of their pouch and release the air bubbles. I've only ever had to do that once. It was not hard to do, but again, you probably want to YouTube this and do your research. Going on with feeding, seahorses eat extremely slowly. They do eat aggressively, but slowly. This guy can pump a quarter cube of mysis in probably 2 or 3 hits, but he never does. He will go up to it and have a great crack at it, but like I said, he just never does it. I would personally never have any other fish or creatures in here. They are, like I said, very slow creatures. You generally want it to do a species only tank. Maybe if you got a big enough tank, you could get a mandarin or something like that, or it won't eat the same food as this guy, or maybe something that eats algae. But I just wouldn't take the risk. These guys are pretty sensitive and they are slow eaters, so I'd probably leave them to themselves. If you guys want a quick scale, this is my finger. He is absolutely tiny. The coral looks huge. My finger looks huge. This is only a 12-gallon tank. Now, to keep this tank stable and to stop algae, basically let the tank mature, guys. Just like any reef tank, let it mature. They don't like fluctuations, and neither do the corals. But I've got an aqua clear filter on there, and it's got probably 4 to 4.5 pounds or 2 kilos of pond matrix meter in the back and a bag of carbon. So I use heaps of biological filtration, and I do weekly 50% water changes in this tank. You can also see that it's bare bottom, so I can siphon any detritus out. This is actually due for a water change tomorrow. But apart from that, I don't think seahorses are too hard to keep. As long as you keep it species only, you take it slowly with these guys, you feed them multiple times a day. Let's be real, they really do need it. And you keep your husbandry on top, they're not really that much harder to keep than any of the other fish or coral. So don't be put off by people saying it's hard to keep a seahorse. They're really not that hard to keep. As long as you keep a stable tank, keep them basically by themselves, and stay on top of your maintenance, you can have a cute little guy just like this. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you learned something and I hope you enjoyed. There'll be more updates soon to come.